A very good morning to you. It is Tuesday, the 20th of October, 2020. Welcome back to the best on-ground weekday kickoff. My name's Pete Fairbairn, and as always, and especially in this week, the biggest week on the Australian sporting calendar with both the AFL and NRL Grand Finals to be played, it's important that I'm joined by by one of the top journalists in the country who covers these sports, and a real pleasure, as always, to welcome Brad Walter from NRL.com. How are you, mate?
I'm going great, Pete. It's a fantastic time of the year, and just really looking forward to this weekend.
Absolutely, mate. We will talk NRL Grand Final, we'll talk AFL Grand Final, and we'll finish with a little bit of rugby union. But we're going to start with a story in the NRL, and unfortunately it isn't a Grand Final story. Not what you want in the week of the biggest game of the year when the headlines are dominated by an error, a gaffe, a mistake off the field, but that's exactly what's eventuated. The story comes from the Sydney Morning Herald from Michael Chammas and Christian Nicolosi. And it's revealing that both Penrith Panthers and NRL officials were left fuming on Monday night after the Daily Telegraph accidentally revealed Jack Whiten from the Raiders as the winner of the Dahlia Medal hours before the official announcement. The blunder has prompted ARL Commission Chairman Peter V'landys to launch an investigation into the matter, with Monday night's ceremony likely to be the very last time the media receive embargoed results. Bad enough, obviously, that somebody at the Telegraph has mistakenly published this article before they had the clearance to do so and broken the embargo. But also this bizarre situation where, because of the pandemic, because of the NRL bubble, anyone who watched the coverage on Fox last night would have seen that it was just a few players in the studio in Sydney together. Penrith Panthers star and Nathan Cleary preparing for his first grand final ever, and he was asked to join that group and to travel from Penrith to Artarmon to do so and sit in the studio alongside the likes of Clint Gutherson, Jack Whiten, James Tedesco, and his father, the Panthers coach Ivan Cleary, was there as well, and these guys knew the result as well before the count and before the telecast, because it was blowing up on social media. Really, really disappointing situation, Brad. Can you talk us through this most unusual evening and the controversy associated with this award over a number of years now?
Yeah, look. It's first up. This wasn't like the Daily Telegraph were trying to scoop anybody or anything like that. It was a mistake. There'd been prepared copy. There'd been an embargo released to select journalists at certain media outlets who knew in advance the award winners, and the idea of embargoed copy is so that they can prepare stories for the paper before the paper goes to print, which would probably coincide with about the time that the Dahlia M's were announced. So the NRL and the media organisations want to make sure that they can give the award the coverage that it deserves. But therefore, that's the idea behind the embargoed content. However, and this has been a procedure for a long, long time. However, one of the issues around that now is that we have obviously everything's online. We've got social media, and somebody's made a mistake. There's a prepared story. And one of the sort of other issues I think around the award is that the Dahlia M was actually started by the Daily Mirror newspaper as a rival award to the Rothmans Medal, which was the big rugby league medal at the time. This is back in the 1980s. And after the News Corp handed over control of the game to the independent commission, or the ARL Commission that now runs rugby league, that was back in 2012. One of the things that News wanted to retain some control of, or the rights to particularly, was the Dahlia M Awards, which is broadcast on Fox, and obviously and the Daily Telegraph is involved in promoting that throughout the year. So they, so it's effectively their award, and they've got a lot of control over that, and they give it a really good run and really good coverage. So unfortunately, that was diminished. There's no betting last night on this award, and that revolves around the betting scandal last year, which was not anything to do with this embargo type content, but there hadn't been betting for a long, long time on rugby league awards, because going way back as far as the Rothmans Medal in the 1990s, there was a betting scandal when David Fairley was a surprise winner over Jason Taylor, North Sydney teammates, and there were big betting plunges on David Fairley to win, and so they hadn't been betting for a long, long time. The integrity around the award has really tightened up since the I think it's fair to say, since the ARL Commission was formed back in 2012, but the embargoed content or embargoed release is something that's probably now going to end. And I suppose it's just that the modern world that we live in, with, as I said, with social media and and things online, people pick up or find things out a lot quicker than what they did in the past.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, look, it's not a case of piling on rugby league here, because mistakes happen. I've published articles, and quickly taken them down, and not on websites as big as the Daily Telegraph, but in my day job, I've certainly done it and had to quickly get them down, and these things happen. But and we even saw last year Rugby Australia, from their own official Wallabies Twitter account, announced the winner of the John Earls Medal half an hour before it was announced at the venue, taking a bit of the lustre off that affair. How does this affect Nathan Cleary and Ivan Cleary and their headspace? Does it have any impact on the grand final, a frustrating and disappointing night like that?
No, I wouldn't think so. I think it'd be just disappointing for everybody involved. It's unclear exactly who knew, because the players and the people at the who were in attendance had their phones removed. Just quickly on the embargo thing, I think the embargoes are created for newspapers, for the printing of newspapers. I think most of us now live in the online era, and I think probably embargoes they're from a bygone era when newspapers, everybody read a newspaper and not necessarily the online stuff. It was all about getting in the next day's newspaper, and I think probably that's probably something that needs to go.
Just really quickly on this as well, as somebody who works for a digital media outlet, do you still receive embargoes for different things, over time, and does it actually help you out a lot with your work?
I do, and it's mostly to do with overseas things. Particularly when an announcement's going to be made at early in the morning or late at night in the UK, and they'll send us things. And I have to admit that I've been accused of breaking deadlines, because you get confused about time differences, or whether the time they meant was their time or your time, and it has caused some angst. And I prefer not to deal with it. I'd rather have a heads up about when something's going to come out, and maybe get it slightly in advance, not hours in advance. But then that's really down to me. Yeah, but it doesn't happen as often as it used to. But yeah, it's certainly something. It is common practice in the industry.
We'll move to something that you've written for NRL.com for our second story today, and it's looking at the fact that really there's not been many father-son or parent-sibling championships or grand finals won in any competitions, really in Australian sport in recent years. And obviously you're looking at this because of the Ivan and Nathan Cleary combination at the Panthers heading into the grand final. You've listed here Andrew and Lindsay Gaze with a couple of NBL championships, Anthony and Tony Mundine, boxing world championships there, Jess and Miriam Fox, the Olympic medal winning slalom canoeist Jess Fox, and also Chloe Esposito and Daniel, modern pentathlon gold medal winner at the 2016 Olympics. And then finally, the subjects, or the interview subjects of this story, are former Penrith superstar Martin Lang and his dad John, who are the only father-son combination to win a grand final. And coincidentally, that was back in 2003 with the Penrith Panthers, the last time they got it done. It's a fantastic article. Martin Lang, very self-deprecating, and says, he didn't have an important role in the team like Nathan Cleary does, and he just went out and did his job, and his father probably wasn't too worried about him and his performance. But I guess it speaks to the huge pressure that's been on the Cleary family since Ivan left the Tigers to return to the Panthers. The weight of the world on a young man's shoulders in Nathan's, as one of the best players in the game, and clearly extremely talented from a young age, but probably expected by many to get there overnight. It's a wonderful story to see them in the grand final. How important has that relationship between father and son been in the Panthers' record-breaking season so far?
Well, Nathan is the Panthers' best player, and obviously Ivan's the coach, so they need to work very closely together. Obviously, they have got a really good relationship. Ivan made it clear that the reason he was going back to Penrith and he walked out on the West Tigers to do so was for the opportunity to coach Nathan. So as I said, they've got a really close relationship. At the time, Ivan was coaching the Tigers and Nathan was playing for the Panthers. and they were living together. Nathan was living at home with his parents. So they're extremely close, and I think Martin Lang made the point that he was a front rower and he didn't have a lot to do with tactics, whereas Nathan obviously does. But it's such a rare achievement. There's so many players who follow in the footsteps of their fathers to play rugby league, AFL, and a whole host of sports. There's very few that get the opportunity to be coached by their dads at elite level sport, and then it's very, very rare for them to go on and enjoy success together. And the thing that Andrew Gaze made the point, which was exactly the same as the Langs, was that at the time they didn't really think of it like that it was anything more significant than just winning a premiership with another coach. But as time's gone on, especially John Lang's got grandkids, Martin's kids, and he said that they look it up on YouTube all the time. They see photos of them together celebrating the premiership. And it's a special thing for their families. More significant for family members than it is for themselves. And Andrew Gaze said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's a wonderful piece of journalism, Brad. It's a really nice angle, and clearly, to speak to Andrew Gaze as well, fantastic angle for the story. Just really quickly on Ivan Cleary, how much influence has Trent Barrett had on him as halves coach or attack coach at the Panthers? And how much credit should Trent Barrett receive for the way that Nathan Cleary's played this year?
Oh, a lot. Look, Trent Barrett is a really good attacking coach. Manly players like Delhi Cherry Evans and Jake Travojevic, Tom Travojevic, they all sing his praises for the influence that he's had on their playing style. And no doubt he's come to Penrith and he's really sharpened up their attack with Happy Coruscant at hooker and Nathan Cleary, Jerome Luai, Dylan Edwards, the fullback. You can really see the influence that Trent has had there. And I suppose we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year when Trent goes to Canterbury, whether there's any sort of drop off or how Penrith are going to deal with that. But yeah, Trent Barrett, Cameron Ciraldo as well, and Ivan Cleary. Obviously, they all deserve enormous credit for what Penrith have been able to deliver this season.
We're going to turn to another code in the AFL, and they say keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. Well, never has there been a more literal example of that than what we've got in Queensland this week in the AFL hub, because you've got Geelong players without families staying at the home of the Southport Sharks. This is as Courtney Walsh tells us in the Oz. You have single Tigers players staying at the KDV Sporting Complex in Carrara. But you have players on both teams who have families staying at the RACV Royal Pines Resort. So where normally Richmond defender Dylan Grimes would be plotting the downfall of Geelong spearhead Tom Hawkins from afar, instead the pair are neighbours this week as the strangest season on record culminates with Saturday's AFL Grand Final. The players in that shared hub with their families say that there hasn't been a lot of conversation around over bacon and eggs at breakfast or anything like that, but it's obviously completely unique in AFL Grand Final week for players to be seeing their opponents so regularly and in such close contact. Is this situation, is it the most 2020 thing you've ever seen, Brad?
Well, it really, I suppose, highlights the fact that the Grand Final is not played in Melbourne and the whole season's been moved. I find it really interesting that players are spread across different locations. I would have thought it'd be so. Like for example, the Melbourne Storm or the New Zealand Warriors, they were all together, families, single players. They were all at the same resort, and they had that place to themselves. And that's what's going to happen in the state of origin, New South Wales, that are all in a resort together. So yeah, I mean, I actually wonder if there'd be any sort of interesting conversations about our hotel's better than your hotel or whatever amongst players from the same team. But look, because they have been in a hub and they're based up in southeast Queensland, and there is this situation where the families are from different teams are all staying together. It has created that situation. I know you said that there's no conversations over bacon and eggs, but I bet you there are. I think that there would be. They would see each other and they've got something in common, something to talk about. They're all away from home. They'd have to be talking about how do you cope? What's it like? How's your family going? They wouldn't be talking footy, but I'm sure that there'd be a lot of conversations there. And it's really interesting because players from rival teams get to, I suppose, know each other better, and there's probably a lot more empathy and a lot more, a different sort of attitude towards people rather than maybe when you're in your own bubble and you don't have any contact with rival players. Therefore, the there tends to be a few more maybe flare-ups. You have a different attitude towards them. I think one thing we've noticed in sport this season is that because the players are in bubbles and they don't get to socialise much, you see them stay on the field after the game and talk to opposition players. Like every player from say last week, every player from the Canberra Raiders is individually standing around talking to players from the Melbourne Storm rather than their own teammates.
It's been fascinating. I guess the proof's in the pudding here, in that, to your point, it's unusual to see the team in different locations, for the same team, but Geelong and Richmond have both made it through to the grand final. So by separating the group and keeping the singles and the rowdy lads in one hub and then the families in another, it appears to have worked really well for them and possibly helped the players with that balance of work and life outside of work as well. We're going to stay with the AFL for our second last story today, and I really want to get your view on this from a Sydney perspective, Brad, or a New South Wales perspective. Jay Clark reports in the Herald Sun that the GWS Giants superstar Jeremy Cameron will join, or has nominated Geelong as the club he would like to join in 2021. We know Cameron is a free agent, a restricted free agent. He can nominate the Cats, but GWS does have the opportunity to match the contract on offer, and therefore the Cats would need to go to satisfy the Giants in a trade. It looks like that's almost certainly what will happen, and the Cats will probably hand over a couple of first-round picks for Jeremy Cameron. Comes on the back of Zach Williams going to Carlton, Aidan Corr leaving that club to go to North Melbourne, and after being smashed in last year's grand final, they missed finals this year, the Giants. With Jeremy Cameron leaving, does this spell the end of GWS's premiership window? And how concerned should we be about the next few years for the Giants, who are a fledgling club with a pretty small fan base?
I think it's really going to depend on the type of trade that they can do. Unless you follow AFL or American sport, you don't really understand exactly how the draft and the trade situation works. But I think that's the key for GWS. They built their success on the back of successful draft picks and trades a few years ago, and they're probably in a similar situation now. They are losing some established players, and they do have to go through a bit of a rebuild. Yeah, they probably have missed that premiership window, or that window is probably closed, I should say. But as long as they get some good picks, they can they can get themselves into a good situation again. I don't think it's really important for them being based in Sydney, and they're out there with the Parramatta Eels and the Penrith Panthers and the Canterbury Bulldogs teams. They're right in the same area as them, and they do need results, and they do need success to have I suppose a major impact.
Yeah, and I guess their potential decline will likely coincide with an anticipated improvement of fortunes for the Sydney Swans, who have been developing for a couple of years with a fairly young group. But there's some real green shoots there at the Swans. So that's going to be a fascinating subplot to watch. And who would have thought that maybe the Gold Coast Suns might win a premiership before the GWS Giants? Stranger things have happened. Our final story today, just really quickly on this one, we've seen that South Africa have obviously nominated or decided that they won't come out to Australia for the Rugby Championship this year. But the Argentinians, the Pumas, are here. They've been in Australia for, I think, close to a month now. They've completed quarantine. They've been training very hard in Sydney, and they will play in a Tri-Nations tournament alongside Australia and the All Blacks. They haven't played any professional rugby, the majority of those players, since March or April this year when Super Rugby was shut down. The Jaguares won't be part of Super Rugby moving forward, and obviously didn't take part in any of the domestic Super Rugby comps that resumed in Australia and New Zealand. Some of their players did, of course, play over in Europe and get some match fitness there, but they're certainly coming into this Tri-Nations series without a lot of match fitness and preparation. They're going to play a game against a Waratahs invitational type team this week, which will feature some contracted Waratahs players. It'll also feature some players from the Shoot Shield in Sydney whose teams have been knocked out of finals contention. The Argentinians have said they don't want fans at the match. They don't want it live streamed. And for what it's worth, I think that's completely reasonable. They're putting themselves on the line here and have the potential to be embarrassed a little bit in the same way that South Africa weren't prepared to do so and weren't prepared to risk poor performance as a result of poor preparation. How important is it to acknowledge the sacrifice that's been made by the Pumas to be here, just in general, Brad?
Oh, without a doubt. Like, without them here, then we're not going to have those championship matches. It's just going to be a Bledisloe Cup. That'll be the international rugby season. So they're providing some content, some opportunity for the Wallabies and the All Blacks to be able to play more games. And to be honest, that's pretty much all it's about. And that's really why they are here. And they're up against it, as you pointed out. No domestic competition. They've had players and coaching staff test positive for coronavirus beforehand, before they came. So there's been really some strict regimes about them coming into the country, the testing they've had to go through, the quarantine period. Everyone's in the clear, which is great. And I'm sure that, they've acclimatised and they've settled in, but it's going to be really hard for them to be able to put a team together of players that haven't played for so long to then come up against the Wallabies and the All Blacks, who are battle hardened from playing in the Bledisloe Cup. I think it's a really tough ask for them, and I think I think that Australian rugby and New Zealand rugby should be thanking them for their efforts, and hopefully they can put up a competitive performance, and hopefully these couple of trial matches that they're going to play beforehand will be really beneficial. Undoubtedly, they will be beneficial. That's a sort of training, that's a sort of preparation that they need.
Yeah, we've seen that, South African rugby, perhaps one of the reasons why they pulled out of the Rugby Championship is because they remain aggrieved at their treatment at the hands of New Zealand when New Zealand declared that they didn't really see them in their future from a Super Rugby perspective. I know Argentina probably don't feature in Super Rugby moving forward necessarily, but I think a word of advice to New Zealand and Rugby Australia would be, let's just be really grateful and let's recognise and retain this relationship with Argentina, because they are going out of their way to try and get this series up and about. Brad, that's all we've got time for today. I'm going to sound a bit like John Farnham on the farewell tour here, but as this is the final week of the show, I want to really thank you for being a regular contributor to the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. It's been fantastic to have your knowledge and nous and insights into rugby league especially, but sport all over Australia. And clearly you have an unbelievable amount of knowledge, which isn't just restricted to rugby league. It's been fantastic having you on the show so regularly, and look forward to catching up soon when borders are open and bubbles are no longer required.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for having me, Pete. And yeah, hopefully I can get to Queensland at some stage soon, or, the border will open and we'll all be up there State of Origin is going to be there on November 18. So we might even get a chance to catch up with you then.
That'd be fantastic. Thanks so much, Brad Walter. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tomorrow we're going to have Adam Pengilly from the Sydney Morning Herald on to continue looking in depth at the grand finals ahead and everything else making waves in the world of sport. Thanks so much for watching and listening to the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. We'll see you then.